My boss spent years humiliating me in front of everyone. He never imagined the quiet assistant bringing him coffee would become his worst nightmare. Let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. Let me tell you how it all began. My name is Claire Thompson. I was 26 when I got the job at Harlow & Cole as an executive assistant to James Whitaker. On paper, it sounded like a dream, a big company, a fancy office on a high floor, and a boss who everyone seemed to admire. James was the kind of man people noticed right away. Tall, silver hair, sharp suits, and a charming smile that made clients feel important. Around the office, people called him a genius, a visionary. But behind those shiny shoes and polite words, there was a man no one really knew. Except for me. Behind closed doors, James was different. The smile disappeared. The charm turned cold. He liked making people feel small, like pieces on his private chessboard. And somehow I became his favorite target. He would call me stupid in a low voice when no one else was around, like a quiet insult meant to hurt. Other times, he'd raise his voice just enough for others to hear. It was never about mistakes. It was about power. Humiliation was his favorite game. Every Monday morning, James held a team meeting in the big glass conference room. It was supposed to be about work, but really, it was his stage to embarrass people. One Monday, I brought a report I'd worked on all weekend. I thought it would help the team save money. He glanced at the first page of my report, the one I had worked so hard on, and let out a loud, mocking laugh. Then he turned to the room, holding the paper like it was a joke. "Listen to this," he sneered. "My assistant thinks she's a financial expert now." A few people gave nervous laughs. Most just looked down, pretending not to hear. My hands shook in my lap. My face burned with shame, but my voice wouldn't come. It was stuck in my throat, buried under the weight of silence. He didn't stop. He kept reading parts of my report out loud, twisting my words to make me look foolish. Then, with a flick of his hand, he tossed the papers across the table, pages flying everywhere like broken wings. "Pick it up," he snapped. I froze for a second. Then I knelt down, my knees pressing into the cold floor, picking up the scattered papers while everyone sat in silence. No one helped. My face burned with embarrassment, but I blinked fast, refusing to let a tear fall. Some mornings, James came in angry, not because something was wrong, but just because he needed to hurt someone. And usually, that someone was me. One morning, before I'd even had my coffee, he stormed over to my desk and demanded a file. It hadn't arrived yet, it was still with another department, but that didn't matter to him. He didn't wait. He raised his voice so the whole office could hear. "What's wrong with you, Natalie? Can't you do anything right?" I opened my mouth to explain, but he waved his hand to shut me up. "Excuses. You're useless." The words hit me like a slap, not just because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it. Like I didn't matter. James loved showing off in front of clients. If someone asked a question he didn't know how to answer, he'd snap his fingers at me and say, "Natalie, since you're always standing around, why don't you make yourself useful?" If I answered right, he'd roll his eyes and say, "Even a broken clock is right twice a day." If I hesitated or got it wrong, he'd sigh loudly and look at the client like I was hopeless. The clients would laugh, not realizing how much it hurt. One afternoon, an important investor came in for a big meeting that could bring millions to the company. I had spent days preparing the presentation James asked for. I checked it again and again to make sure it was perfect. During the meeting, James clicked through my slides, then suddenly slammed my laptop shut so hard the sound echoed in the room. The investor looked surprised. James turned to him and said, "I'm sorry about this mess. My assistant struggles with the simplest things." He didn't even look at me as he walked the investor out, leaving me there, humiliated and alone. Another time, James walked into the break room where people were talking. He pointed at the coffee I was drinking and said loudly, "That's probably the only thing you're capable of doing right, drinking coffee." People gave awkward laughs. I smiled weakly and stared at the floor, holding back tears. James's favorite way to embarrass me was giving me impossible tasks with no time to finish. He'd throw papers on my desk and say, "I need this done in an hour. Don't mess it up, though I know you will." If I finished on time, he'd say nothing or find a tiny mistake to yell about. If I missed the deadline, he would shout in front of anyone nearby. It wasn't just the big humiliations. It was the small, everyday cruelty that wore me down little by little. He'd roll his eyes every time I spoke, like even hearing my voice annoyed him. He corrected me harshly in front of junior staff, making sure they knew exactly where I stood. And whenever I dared to ask a question, even a simple one, he'd smirk and say, "You must be confused again." James didn't just enjoy control. He fed off fear. He watched for it in my eyes like a predator watched for weakness. And though every insult, every smirk, every staged humiliation chipped away at my confidence, I never let him see the damage. I smiled when I had to. I nodded when he sneered. But inside, I was learning. And I was keeping track of everything. I taught myself to smile when he mocked me, a tight, practiced smile that hid the storm inside. I nodded when he shouted, never flinching, even as my chest tightened and my stomach curled into knots. My voice stayed calm, even when my hands shook beneath the desk. I kept telling myself, just survive today. Just get through this. But deep down, beneath all the fear and exhaustion, a small voice inside me started to speak. And every day, it grew louder. "You will pay for this." Months into working for James, I learned something important. He wasn't just cruel. He was careless. He liked to brag when he thought no one was paying attention. Bragging about deals that didn't exist. About bonuses he deserved. About how he moved money around to make himself look like a hero in the reports. He needed people to admire him, even if it meant lying. At first, I thought maybe he was exaggerating. Maybe just office gossip mixed with ego. But then, I started seeing the cracks. Receipts for expensive dinners with clients I knew didn't exist. Hotel stays on nights he told everyone he was homesick. Credit card bills showing luxury shopping, all paid by the company. It was sloppy. Too sloppy. One night I stayed late, alone in the office with only the flickering lights above me. I was filing paperwork when I noticed a folder left on his desk, marked private in bold letters. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were invoices I'd never seen before. Some were double-billed. Some had crazy prices. One payment went to a company I'd never heard of, no logo, no address. Just numbers. Just shadows. I paused, then I scanned every page and emailed them to a fake email I'd made just for this. Something no one could trace. When I hit send, I felt a chill run down my spine. Like I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from. But that little voice inside me whispered, "Keep going." The next morning, James strolled in like nothing was wrong, late, smug, whistling. He dumped his briefcase on my desk. "Natalie, handle this paperwork. And don't screw it up." I opened it. More contracts. But the signatures, they were off. Messy fakes. Not even close to the real ones we had on file. He wasn't just lying. He was forging. That day, I made a choice. I would save everything. I bought a flash drive and kept it hidden in my purse. I copied every suspicious email. Every message where he told me to adjust the numbers or backdate a contract. I took screenshots of lies he told clients. I even built a spreadsheet organized, detailed, tracking every shady transaction. Dates. Amounts. The excuses he gave. James made it easy. He was arrogant. He thought he couldn't be touched. He'd sit in his office, talking loud on speakerphone, bragging about how he faked reports to make profits look bigger. Or how he convinced vendors to kick back 10% under the table. No paper trail. One day, I heard him say, "If the audit committee gets too close, we'll just blame the accountants. They won't trace it back to me." I sat still. Didn't even breathe. Later that night, I typed out everything I remembered. Sometimes I stayed late, past midnight. Just me and the cleaning crew 2 floors below. I'd slip into James's office like a ghost. Inside his locked cabinet, I found a goldmine. Bank records showing huge transfers to hidden accounts. Fake companies, nothing but P.O. boxes and fake numbers. Contracts with forged names. Fake invoices. It was all there. I scanned everything. Copied it all. My heart raced with every click. My ears strained for footsteps. I lived in fear that I'd get caught, that James would find out, and I'd lose everything. But then I'd picture his face. That smug smirk. That cruel laugh in meetings. And I'd keep going. Because this time, the power wasn't his. It was mine. Quietly, I started contacting people James had hurt before me. There were so many. Old assistants who quit after he screamed at them. Interns who vanished after public humiliation. Vendors who stopped answering our calls because of his threats. At first, I didn't know who would help. But slowly they did. One former assistant answered my message late at night. She cried within minutes. "I'm so glad someone's finally standing up to him," she said. I thought no one would believe me. She sent me old emails, proof James pressured her to fake numbers, change spreadsheets, hide mistakes. Another ex-employee sent me a recording. It was rough, but you could hear him. James, cold and threatening, warning her. "If you say one word, I'll ruin your career. You'll disappear." I saved everything. Every file. Every voice clip. Every broken piece of the puzzle. Because soon, I'd put it all together. And James Whitaker would finally understand what it feels like to be powerless. I didn't keep the evidence in my apartment. It wasn't safe. I rented a small storage locker outside the city. Inside, I kept boxes filled with printed emails, copies of contracts, and USB drives. I felt paranoid. Like a spy. But for the first time in years, I felt powerful. Because I knew how this would end. Not with a scream. Not with a breakdown. But with the truth. And this time, I would be the one holding it. At the office, I kept acting like the perfect assistant. I smiled when James barked orders. I laughed politely when he joked about me in front of clients. I brought him his coffee just the way he liked it, black, 1 sugar cube, stirred twice. He never suspected a thing. But every day, my secret folder of evidence kept growing. Every week, I was one step closer to exposing him. One afternoon, James called me into his office in front of 2 senior partners. He accused me of messing up an expense report, the same one he had changed himself. He yelled, slamming his hand on the desk so hard the pens jumped. "This is why you'll never be more than a secretary," he shouted. I kept my face calm, but inside my anger burned hotter than ever. I walked out of his office stronger than before. I knew I would win. At night, I read articles and books on whistleblowing and workplace fraud. I wanted to make sure when I acted, it would be legal and impossible for them to deny. I took notes on mistakes others had made and promised myself I wouldn't repeat them. When James announced the company's upcoming merger with a huge firm, he looked happier than ever. He bragged that he was about to become the youngest CEO in company history. He held meetings where he made everyone clap for him as he shared his big dreams. I clapped too. I smiled. But inside, I knew this was perfect. The merger meant auditors would be coming. All I had to do was wait, and then hand them everything. At night, I imagined James's face when he realized I'd been collecting his lies. That picture gave me strength to keep going. As the merger date got closer, the office buzzed with excitement. People talked about raises, promotions, bigger offices. James walked around like a king, shaking hands and promising everyone bright futures. One morning, he called me in again. His tone was cold beneath his fake smile. "Natalie, if you keep doing what I say, I might let you keep your job after this merger." He wanted me to feel powerless. I nodded politely, hiding the anger inside. Over the next few weeks, James worked hard to impress the board. He made me print fake reports, change numbers, and send them to big clients. Each time he gave me a fake report, I saved a copy for myself. My folder got so thick I needed a second one. I stayed late almost every night. I told people I was catching up on paperwork. But really, I was building a clear timeline of his lies. I matched fake reports to real data, showing exactly how he changed things. I made a master file with every email, every voicemail where he told me to do something illegal. I labeled everything clearly: fake contract June, altered invoice August. I wanted the truth to be easy to understand. The week before the merger closed, James threw a big office party. He hired a caterer, bought fancy wine, and gave a speech. "This is the beginning of a new era," he said, raising his glass. "And none of it would be possible without me." Everyone cheered. I smiled too. But inside, I was cold. He had no idea what was coming. I used an anonymous email to contact someone at the other company, the head auditor. I said I had proof of fraud. He asked for everything I had. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, shaking as I copied everything onto a USB drive. When I finished, I packed it carefully and wrote, "To the audit committee. Urgent." I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if James would guess it was me. I worried he might try to hurt me. But I felt stronger than ever. After years of his insults, I was finally taking my power back. The next morning, I mailed the package. Overnight delivery. As I left the post office, my heart pounded. But I felt a strange peace. There was no turning back. That day, James called me into his office again. He was in a good mood, humming as he signed papers. "The final meeting is tomorrow," he said. "By next week, I'll be on top of the world." He smirked. "Remember, Natalie, stay in your lane. I'd hate to see you lose everything you've worked for." I smiled sweetly. "Of course, Mr. Whitaker." That night, I stayed late one last time. I packed up my things, shut down my computer, and looked out at the city lights. The building felt quiet, like it was holding its breath. Tomorrow, the truth would come out. The morning of the audit felt surreal. The office buzzed with whispers. Some people looked excited. Others looked scared. At exactly 9 a.m., the elevator doors opened. 4 auditors stepped out in dark suits. Everyone went quiet. James walked out of his office, smiling like he was welcoming old friends. "Gentlemen," he boomed. "Let's make this quick so we can start celebrating." The lead auditor looked him straight in the eye. "We received some documents you need to explain." James's smile froze. Around the office, people stopped pretending to work and started listening. James led the auditors to the big conference room, but I stayed at my desk by the glass wall, pretending to sort files. From my seat, I could see everything. For hours, I watched through the glass as the auditors broke him down, page by page. At first, James sat tall, his voice loud and confident. But slowly it cracked. His face turned red. His hands waved wildly, trying to talk his way out of it. The auditors stayed calm. They flipped pages slowly, asking questions in steady voices. From my desk, I heard parts of the conversation. "These numbers don't match the reports. This signature looks fake. Can you explain these transfers?" James's voice dropped, shaky now. "Those are mistakes. My assistant must have mixed things up." My heart pounded, but I stayed calm. I had planned for this moment. He was trying to blame me, but I had already made sure that wouldn't work. Then I saw it happen. Mr. Daniels pulled out something from his briefcase, my USB drive. He placed it on the table like it was a loaded weapon. "We know these didn't come from your assistant," he said calmly. "We know exactly who wrote them and who signed them." Silence filled the room. James didn't move. His jaw tightened. His eyes locked on the USB like it might explode. And I knew he realized it was over. His face turned pale. He looked around the room, searching for someone to help him. But no one moved. Then, the conference room door opened. 2 security guards stepped inside. The office went silent. Everyone stopped to watch. Mr. Daniels spoke clearly. "James Whittaker, you are suspended immediately for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery." James jumped up. His chair crashed to the floor. "You can't do this," he yelled. "I built this company. I made you all rich." No one answered. The guards stepped forward. James's shoulders sank. Slowly, he lowered his head. As they led him to the elevator, his eyes met mine. He knew. His face twisted with rage. For a second, he looked like he wanted to fight back. But the guards didn't let him move. His face turned pale, his hands shook. The elevator doors opened. He stepped in, still glaring at me like he could burn me with his eyes. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. The doors closed. James Whittaker was gone. Silence hung over the office. Slowly, people started to breathe again. Some looked shocked. Others looked relieved. The lead auditor came out, papers in hand. His face unreadable. He looked at me for a moment, then gave a small nod. Not pity. Respect. That small gesture meant everything. Later, the partners called a meeting. They explained James's crimes, how he lied and cheated. They promised things would change now. Slowly, people started sharing their own stories, secrets they had been too scared to tell. Some came to me quietly. One woman hugged me in the break room. "You saved us," she whispered. That afternoon, I was called upstairs to the executive floor. The place where I used to deliver coffee, head down. Now, I walked in tall. The room was serious. One senior partner leaned forward. "Natalie," he said, "what you did took courage. You helped us see the truth. We want you to stay and step up as senior operations manager." I almost couldn't speak. This was the future I dreamed of, though I never thought it would come this way. "Thank you," I said, steady. "I won't let you down." Later that week, I packed up James's office. It felt quiet but peaceful. I boxed up his expensive pens, his fake awards, his empty symbols of power. With each box, it felt like closing a chapter and reclaiming what he thought he had stolen from me. I stood by his office window, watching the sunset over the city. The sky burned gold, like a quiet reward for everything I'd survived. For the first time in years, I felt no fear. I felt powerful. The days that followed felt like breathing fresh air after years locked in a room with no windows. Laughter returned to the office. People walked taller. Meetings were calmer. Eyes met without flinching. The whole place felt lighter, freer. My new role wasn't easy. James left behind a trail of lies and mess. But cleaning it up made me prouder with every passing day. Colleagues who once looked down on me now came to me for guidance, advice, and respect. On my first day as senior operations manager, someone brought me coffee, black, 1 sugar cube, stirred twice. "It's nice to finally breathe in this office," she said with a small smile. "Thank you for giving us that back." I stayed late those first weeks, not because I was scared, but because I had purpose now. I rewrote policies. I built systems that valued honesty, fairness, and respect, especially for women in roles like mine. I taught people how to work with confidence, not fear. The merger went through clean, honest, and stronger without James Whittaker's shadow hanging over it. During the signing ceremony, the CEO of the other firm shook my hand and said, "Your work gave us the confidence to move forward." No compliment had ever meant more. Sometimes I thought about those dark days. About how he tried to humiliate me. About the names he called me in front of others, just as secretary. But I also remembered how I stayed. Watched. Collected. Waited. Until the moment was right. One evening, I walked through the quiet office alone, past the conference room where he once threw my work across the table like garbage. Now, it was just a room. A room where I had reclaimed my dignity. I caught my reflection in the glass. I barely recognized the woman staring back, calm, certain, unapologetically strong. We celebrated the merger with laughter, pizza, and late-night music. In that very room, I smiled. Because this time, I wasn't picking up scattered papers from the floor. I was leading. I was respected. And somewhere, I knew James Whittaker was reading headlines about himself: fraud, embezzlement, disgrace. His empire shattered. His reputation ruined. His arrogance silenced. I hope he regrets every time he laughed at a woman who worked beneath him. Every cruel word. Every smug order. Every time he made his secretary feel small. Especially me. Because in the end, the secretary brought him down. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about remembering who I was all along and showing the world who I could become. The truth doesn't need to scream to win. It just needs patience. And when the time is right, it speaks louder than any insult ever could. If you're listening, you are stronger than you think. You deserve respect. No one, not a man like James Whittaker or anyone else, gets to take your power. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's patient. And it's unstoppable. I didn't just survive him. I became everything he feared a woman like me could be. And I'm only getting started. If you've ever had a boss like this, be prepared and tell us your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more.